All right, ascription, this is whether the families have chosen to identify themselves in those two categories. Now, just because the categories were created, it doesn't actually mean that people from the communities that say, oh, great, I'm a traveller. One of the kind of traditions is called passing, which just means keeping your head down, basically. So, as Irish travellers and English gypsies appear like other Irish people, other English people, there is a possibility for a child to go into school without their ethnic identity being disclosed. And the default setting, I'd say, for most members of those communities is that's how we prefer it. We don't particularly want to put our head above the parapet. Roma are quite interesting. I'd say the argument's similar, because although a lot of Roma are noticeably Asian in appearance, in areas like East London and many of the Midlands towns where there are higher levels of those groups, they feel they can merge with the kind of overall Asian population. So they don't feel any great need to make a fuss. But the other thing is, again in terms of Roma were enslaved in the 19th century in what is now Romania, and they were victims of the Holocaust. And so the whole thing about saying, you know, yeah, put my name down on a list is not exactly the first thing that comes to mind. So what we found was we got the figures from the DCSF. They said these are the schools we think have the most Gypsy Roma traveller children in them. And what we did was we did a check with Traveller Education Support Services. And the Traveller Education Support Services were coming up with about 40% more children than those who'd ascribed to the categories. So that was one of the issues. And to be fair, well, in terms of data, we couldn't do very well. No, we did do something, but we were still constrained to a large extent by those ethnic categories. But when we went into school, then it wasn't as big a problem, because the schools would be saying, yeah, these are our travellers, whether or not they'd ascribe to the categories. Right, this is where I did some mucking around, because I think these figures are quite interesting. The data analysis followed children through from year 6 to year 11. And apparently there is a huge level of dropout, but we said, do we know whether those kids are changing their ascriptions? So what we actually managed to do was get the unique pupil numbers. We took the whole cohort who identified in year 6, but then tracked them not by their ethnic identity, by their unique pupil numbers. And what comes out is truly horrifying, I think. 2/3, basically, of Irish travellers and... All right, yeah, I've divided this. Roma, not EAL, is basically who we think are gypsies. English gypsies, because they're not second language learners. And Roma EAL are the second language learners, so effectively they are Roma. That was how we broke up that ethnic category. And you'll see, these are 2/3, and Roma, 85% of those who identified in year 6 had changed their ethnic identity by the time they were in year 11. And I think it's a whole area there. Is it in primary schools you feel less threatened, more included, so you say, yeah, that's who I am. But I'm not saying anything like that in a secondary school. I'm keeping a very low profile. Is it when children transfer to secondary school schools aren't as sensitive in building up the relationship with the parents. Because what happens in primary schools often is the schools will get to know a family is from these groups over a process of time and will, you know, modify the ethnic ascription. But in secondary schools, more impersonal, it's less likely to happen. But anyway, for whatever reason, huge proportion change their ascription. I actually think this is quite interesting too. You know, 1 in 5 also change.
Is it okay to chip in?
Yeah, of course.
Is it also that secondary children can start to make their own ethnicity declaration rather than being sort of,
could be,
you know, having to just rely on their parents' choice, and they may actually see their ethnicity in a different way from the way their parents do.
We had a Roma girl in a secondary school who was used as a role model within the school. I mean, obviously, clearly known to be Roma by everybody. But she said, it's my business. And yeah, it is really.
What did she change her ethnicity to, do you know?
Well, it would be white European.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's the other thing. The alternatives are true. White British, white Irish, white European, not really white, but pretty near. And they're bigger categories. So do I want to be in a small category, which is actually subject to a huge amount of kind of prejudice, or can I just merge with a bigger category? You know, it's all very understandable, isn't it?
But also, I mean, members of other ethnic groups may well, you may see the same trend because, you know,
absolutely,
the secondary years, the
yeah,
kids may want to be kind of street and cool and hip and part of the group, and then maybe when they go into adults, they might actually change back again and be proud of their.
Yeah. Somebody at the back. Yeah?
Just to say that, I mean, in our school, I'm sure it's the same with every other school, we every year we give the pupils a data collection sheet,
right,
which has got their names, address, doctor, ethnicity on. The pupils take that home to fill in.
Yeah.
If the parents don't want to fill it in, the pupil probably fills it in for them, so they don't get me shouting at them or wherever the teachers think. So they return it, and we just take the information as on that sheet and just pass it to the office.
Yeah.
And so you will get changes there, which we're probably not even aware of. And it's the pupils filling it in, not the parents.
It's a very complex issue because you do get things like high levels of exclusion within these communities. So in that way, ethnic monitoring is important to kind of check on or to at least collect information on that. But my feeling is, I've got 2 of my kids that are mixed heritage, and their identity changes in different settings, basically. In some settings, they're middle class. Well, they never regard themselves as white, but they just regard themselves as regular kids from this area. And in confrontational issues, they'll reclaim their heritage. So yeah, I think it's a hugely difficult area. And the problem was that the last government relied so much on data and identification that was the way to deliver for kids in terms of developing policies. I don't necessarily think it is a very good way of allowing children to express their identity. But anyway, I digress.
Doesn't it also affect their school's exam results? Because by GCSE and your all of statistics, the GRT group will be, because the numbers are reducing by 75%,
yeah,
they're going to be doing less well for their 5A to stars, aren't they? Whatever
yeah.
group they're in.
And the other thing is contextual data. Getting the kids to identify as being members of a low achieving group actually helps the school, doesn't it? Because there is a lower target for that group. Okay. Yeah, I'm just saying that travel education support services and schools don't rely on ethnic ascription alone. And the only real way to monitor those groups is to have close links with families, community groups, and so forth.